The reluctant Promise Priya Sharma stared at the acceptance letter in her hands, the words, "Congratulations on your admission to the medical program," blurring as tears welled in her eyes. After years of relentless studying and sacrifice, her dream was finally within reach. She placed the letter on the kitchen table of their modest home in Mumbai, anticipating her parents' joy when they returned. The sound of the front door opening came much earlier than expected. Her father, Vikram, walked in with slumped shoulders and hollow eyes. "Papa, what happened? Why are you home so early?" Priya asked, immediately forgetting about her letter. "They're taking everything, Beta," he whispered, collapsing into a chair. "The loan sharks, the bank, the business is gone." Over the next hour, the devastating truth emerged. Her father's textile business had collapsed under predatory loans, leaving them with crushing debt. Their home would be seized within weeks, and worse, her father had used their family home as collateral. "I've failed you all," Vikram said, his voice breaking. That night, as her parents whispered frantically in the next room, Priya overheard her mother mention someone named Arjun Malhotra. "The Malhotra's son? He's looking for a bride?" her father asked. "Yes, his mother approached me last month at the temple. They want a traditional girl from a good family. They don't care about dowry." Priya's stomach tightened. She knew of the Malhotras, everyone did. Their tech empire, Malhotra Innovations, was among the largest in India. Their son, Arjun, had been featured in business magazines as a ruthless CEO who had tripled the company's value since taking over from his father. The next morning, with puffy eyes and a resolute expression, Priya confronted her parents. "I heard you last night. You're thinking of arranging my marriage to Arjun Malhotra." Her mother looked away, ashamed. "Beta, we would never force." "I'll do it," Priya interrupted, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "If it saves our family, I'll meet him." The meeting was arranged at the Malhotra mansion 2 days later. Priya wore her finest salwar kameez, a simple green outfit that brought out the amber flecks in her brown eyes. She sat across from Arjun in a lavish sitting room, feeling like she was at a business negotiation rather than a marriage meeting. Arjun Malhotra was not what she expected. Tall and impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, he had intelligent eyes that studied her carefully. At 32, he was 8 years her senior, with an air of someone who commanded rooms without trying. "Your father's business situation is unfortunate," he said after introductions. "I understand you've been accepted to medical school." Priya's eyes widened in surprise. "I make it my business to know details before entering any arrangement," he explained. "I need a wife who understands discretion and who can represent our family well. In return, your family's debts will be cleared, your home saved, and your education funded." His clinical approach only confirmed Priya's fears. This wasn't about love. It was a transaction. "And what would you expect from me?" she asked, lifting her chin. Something flickered in Arjun's eyes. "Respect, perhaps. Loyalty. Companionship at company events. Time to build a family eventually. But I won't interfere with your studies." When Priya returned home, she made her decision. For her parents, for their home, for her future as a doctor that could still be salvaged, she would marry Arjun Malhotra. But she promised herself one thing: she would never give him her heart. This was a contract, not a love story. The wedding was arranged quickly, a lavish affair she moved through like a beautiful ghost. As Priya took her vows, she reminded herself that some dreams required sacrifice. She would be a doctor and save her family. That would be enough. She never expected that the hardest promise to keep would be the one she made to herself. Walls of Glass. Priya's new life began in a penthouse apartment that occupied the entire top floor of a gleaming skyscraper in South Mumbai. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the Arabian Sea, but to Priya, they only emphasized the transparent prison she had chosen for herself. "Your room is here," Arjun said, opening double doors to reveal a spacious bedroom suite. "Mine is across the hall. I thought you'd appreciate your privacy while you adjust." Priya nodded silently, surprised by the consideration. She had expected to immediately share a bedroom with her new husband. "I've arranged for a driver to take you to medical school each day," he continued, handing her a sleek smartphone. "My number and the driver's are programmed in. The housekeeper, Lakshmi, comes daily except Sundays." Arjun spoke efficiently, like he was onboarding a new employee. "I usually leave by 6 and return after 9. I have dinner meetings most evenings, so don't wait for me." "I understand," Priya replied coolly. "Our paths need hardly cross." Something flickered across his face, perhaps disappointment, before his professional mask returned. "I have a meeting. Make yourself at home." In those first weeks, Priya lived like a ghost in the luxurious apartment. She threw herself into her medical studies, leaving early and returning late, sometimes finding evidence that Arjun had come and gone without them ever seeing each other. Their marriage existed on paper and in the generous monthly allowance deposited into her account. Her classmates at medical school marveled at her transformation from scholarship student to a Malhotra. "You hit the jackpot," her friend Divya whispered, during anatomy lab. "Is he as intimidating at home as he is in those business profiles?" "I wouldn't know," Priya replied, focusing on her dissection. "We barely speak." One evening, after a particularly grueling pathology exam, Priya returned home earlier than usual. She was surprised to find Arjun in the kitchen, his suit jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up as he stirred something on the stove. "You cook?" The question slipped out before she could stop herself. Arjun looked up, equally surprised to see her. "Only the basics. My mother believed every person should know how to feed themselves regardless of wealth." He gestured to the pot. "It's just khichdi. Would you like some?" The simple comfort food was exactly what Priya needed after her stressful day. Against her better judgment, she nodded. They ate in awkward silence until Arjun asked, "How was your exam?" "Challenging," she admitted. "The professor is notorious for trick questions." "Dr. Kapoor?" When Priya looked surprised, Arjun explained, "I looked into the medical school faculty when arranging your transfer. His research on neurodegenerative diseases is impressive, if controversial." The conversation gradually eased as they discussed her studies. Priya was surprised by Arjun's knowledge and thoughtful questions. For a brief moment, she glimpsed something beyond the stern CEO, a curious mind that seemed genuinely interested in her world. The next morning, Priya found a small package on the kitchen counter with her name on it. Inside was a state-of-the-art tablet with a note, "For your studies. It has all the medical textbooks preloaded." She wanted to refuse the gift, to maintain the emotional distance she had carefully constructed, but the practical side of her acknowledged how useful it would be. Reluctantly, she brought it to school. One evening a few weeks later, Priya answered a call from her mother. "How are you, Beta? Is he treating you well?" The concern in her mother's voice was evident. "I'm fine, Mama. The marriage is cordial." "Cordial?" her mother sighed. "You know, love can grow with time." "This isn't about love," Priya reminded her. "It's an arrangement that's working for everyone." After hanging up, Priya found herself restless. She wandered into the living room, where she discovered a small library nook she'd barely noticed before. The shelves were filled with books, medical, texts certainly, but also classics, poetry, and modern fiction. She ran her fingers along the spines, stopping at a collection of Rabindranath Tagore's poems, her favorite since childhood. The book fell open to a dog-eared page with a passage, underlined, "Love does not claim possession but gives freedom." Priya stared at the marked lines, wondering about the man who had underlined them. It didn't fit with the calculated businessman who had proposed their marriage of convenience. As she replaced the book, she noticed a framed photograph hidden among the volumes, a much younger Arjun with an elderly woman, both laughing by a lakeside. The joy in his expression was so genuine, so unlike the controlled man she knew, that Priya found herself studying it longer than she intended. "My grandmother," Arjun's voice came from behind her. Priya jumped, nearly dropping the frame. "She raised me after my parents became consumed with the business." You look happy, Priya observed, carefully replacing the photo. I was. She was the only one who saw me as more than a Malhotra heir. He hesitated, then added, she would have liked you. Before Priya could respond, Arjun's phone rang. The moment of vulnerability vanished as he answered, his voice returning to its crisp, professional tone. He excused himself with a nod, leaving Priya alone with her confused thoughts. That night, lying in her separate bedroom, Priya stared at the ceiling. The walls she had built between them suddenly felt less solid. She reminded herself sternly that convenient glimpses of humanity didn't change the nature of their arrangement. This marriage was a contract, not a connection. But as she drifted to sleep, she couldn't help wondering about the man who read poetry and cooked comfort food, who kept his grandmother's photo hidden among books, yet gave Priya her own space without question. The Arjun Malhotra she was beginning to glimpse was far more complicated than the businessman she had agreed to marry. Unexpected defenders. 3 months into their marriage, Priya had settled into a rhythm. Mornings meant quick breakfasts before Arjun left for work. Evenings often found her studying late at the hospital library, and weekends became a delicate dance of polite coexistence. The walls between them remained, but occasional cracks had formed. Small conversations over tea, a shared laugh at a news headline, recommendations for books they'd both enjoyed. Today, however, broke their careful routine. Priya stood frozen, in the university hallway, staring at the notice board where the hospital rotation assignments were posted. Her name appeared under Dr. Rawal's orthopedic department, the most competitive rotation that she had desperately wanted. But someone had crossed it out and scribbled reassigned beside it. Tough luck, Sharma. Oh wait, it's Malhotra now, isn't it? Dr. Verma, the rotation coordinator, approached with a clipboard. We've moved you to general practice, more suitable for your circumstances. My circumstances? Priya questioned, confusion turning to indignation. I ranked second in the class. I earned that orthopedic rotation. Dr. Verma lowered his voice. Let's be realistic. You're married to one of India's wealthiest men. You don't need to take spots from students with actual career ambitions. He glanced at her wedding ring. Everyone knows why you're really here. Humiliation burned through Priya. She had worked twice as hard since the marriage to prove herself, yet they still saw her as nothing but a rich man's wife playing doctor. That evening, she returned home earlier than usual, eyes red-rimmed from frustrated tears she'd refused to shed in public. She hadn't planned to mention the incident to Arjun. What could he possibly understand about her struggle to be taken seriously? But when he returned home and found her aggressively chopping vegetables in the kitchen, the story spilled out. It's fine, she concluded, knife thudding against the cutting board. I'll just work harder next semester. Arjun was quiet for so long that Priya thought he wasn't listening. When she turned to look at him, she was startled by the cold anger in his typically composed expression. It's not fine, he said simply, loosening his tie. What's this doctor's name again? It doesn't matter. I don't want special treatment because of who I married. That would only make things worse. Arjun studied her for a moment. What if it's not special treatment, but correcting an injustice? The next morning, Priya arrived at the university to find Dr. Verma unusually accommodating. There's been a reassessment of rotations based strictly on academic performance, he explained stiffly. You've been returned to orthopedics. Later, she overheard whispers that the medical school's new research wing, previously named after Dr. Verma's mentor, would now honor a different physician. The Malhotra Foundation had apparently reconsidered their donation priorities. When confronted, Arjun simply shrugged. I made no threats or demands. I merely inquired about the school's commitment to merit-based opportunities while discussing potential funding. The rest was their decision. Priya was conflicted, grateful yet uneasy about Arjun's intervention. I need to succeed on my own terms, she insisted. And you will, he replied. But sometimes even the most talented people need level ground to stand on. This new side of Arjun, the quiet defender, was harder to reconcile with her determination to keep him at a distance. 2 weeks later, Priya faced an even greater challenge when they attended the annual Malhotra family Diwali celebration. The sprawling ancestral home in Juhu Beach was filled with relatives, business associates, and Mumbai's elite. Arjun's mother, Sunita Malhotra, a regal woman draped in an expensive silk sari, assessed Priya with critical eyes. "So, you're still attending that medical school? I thought you'd have realized by now that a Malhotra wife has more important responsibilities." Before Priya could respond, Arjun's aunt joined them. "When are you planning to start a family? Arjun needs an heir, not a wife who spends all day with cadavers." Throughout the evening, similar comments came from all directions, thinly veiled, in polite conversation. Priya maintained her composure, though each barb stung. She had expected this. It was part of the bargain she'd made. But the reality was more difficult than she'd anticipated. She was arranging sweets on a platter in the kitchen, taking a moment away from the crowd, when she overheard Arjun's voice from the adjoining room. "Mother, I need to make something clear," he was saying, his tone quiet but firm. "Priya's education is non-negotiable. Her career as a doctor is part of who she is, and I won't have anyone in this family suggesting otherwise." "But son," his mother protested, "a doctor's wife cannot fulfill the social obligations of our family. What will people say? They'll say that the Malhotra family has evolved beyond outdated traditions. Priya will be a brilliant physician, and I'm proud to support her journey." The conviction in his voice left Priya speechless. She had assumed Arjun viewed her medical career as a temporary indulgence, not something he genuinely respected. Later, that night as their driver took them home, Priya finally found her voice. "You didn't have to defend me to your mother." Arjun looked out at the Mumbai skyline before answering. "I meant every word. Your passion for medicine is admirable. It's one of the reasons I—" He paused, then continued more carefully. "It's a quality I've come to respect greatly." "Thank you," she said softly, realizing the words were insufficient for the emotions swirling within her. That night, alone in her room, Priya confronted an uncomfortable truth. The emotional distance she had so carefully maintained was beginning to close, not because Arjun demanded it, but because her own heart was betraying her. She had never expected him to champion her dreams. In the story she had constructed, he was supposed to be the businessman who had purchased a suitable wife, not the man who defended her ambitions against his own family. For the first time since their wedding, Priya allowed herself to wonder if there might be more to their arrangement than she had permitted herself to believe. The thought both terrified and exhilarated her. The night that changed everything. 6 months into their marriage, Priya found herself in the unusual position of preparing for a dinner at home with Arjun. Their paths had been crossing more frequently. Morning, coffee shared in comfortable silence, the occasional weekend lunch, brief conversations about their days. But this was different. Arjun had actually requested this evening together, mentioning he had something to discuss. Priya smoothed her hands over her simple blue churidar, wondering why she felt nervous. This wasn't a date. It was a discussion with the man who was technically her husband, but practically still a stranger in many ways. A stranger who defended her to his family, who remembered how she took her tea, who left medical journal articles that might interest her on the kitchen counter. The doorbell interrupted her thoughts. Strange. Arjun had his keys. She opened the door to find her younger sister Neha, her face streaked with tears. "Neha, what's wrong?" "It's Mom," Neha sobbed. "She collapsed at the temple. Dad took her to Metropolitan Hospital, but they're saying—" She broke down again. "They're saying they need to operate immediately, but we don't have the insurance for the specialist they recommend." Priya's medical training kicked in. What are her symptoms? Did they mention what they suspect? As Neha described their mother's sudden dizziness, slurred speech, and right-side weakness, Priya's heart sank. The symptoms pointed to a cerebral hemorrhage, serious and time-sensitive. "We need to go now," Priya said, grabbing her purse and phone. She hesitated only briefly, before sending Arjun a text explaining the emergency. At Metropolitan Hospital, they found their father pacing the waiting room, looking older than Priya had ever seen him. "The doctors say she needs a neurosurgeon," he explained, his voice breaking. "Dr. Mehra is the best, but he's not covered by our insurance. They're preparing her for surgery with the resident instead." Priya knew the resident neurosurgeons were capable, but with her mother's life at stake, she wanted the very best. She was calculating how much she could transfer from her account when Arjun appeared in the waiting room doorway, still in his business suit. "I came as soon as I got your message," he said, crossing to Priya. "How is she?" Priya quickly explained the situation. Without hesitation, Arjun turned to the nurse's station. "Please page Dr. Mehra immediately. Tell him Mrs. Sharma is to receive whatever treatment she needs, regardless of insurance status. The Malhotra Foundation will cover all expenses." Within minutes, the hospital's atmosphere changed. Dr. Mehra appeared, specialists were consulted, and Priya's mother was prioritized for immediate surgery. "They're taking her to the operating room now," a nurse informed them. "The surgery may take several hours." As they settled in for the wait, Priya expected Arjun to leave, to return to the important meetings and obligations that surely awaited him. Instead, he asked if anyone needed coffee, then disappeared to find the hospital cafeteria. When he returned with drinks for everyone, Priya noticed he had also removed his tie and suit jacket, as if preparing for a long night. He sat beside her, father, speaking quietly about mundane topics, cricket scores, weather forecasts, providing distraction from the anxiety that filled the room. Hours passed. Neha eventually fell asleep on a row of chairs while their father stepped outside occasionally to compose himself. Around midnight, when the waiting room had emptied except for their small group, Priya found herself alone with Arjun. "You don't have to stay," she said softly. "This could take all night." "I know." He looked at her with those steady eyes that seemed to see more than she wanted to reveal. "But you shouldn't be alone right now." "Why?" The question escaped before she could stop it. A question about more than just this night. Arjun considered his answer carefully. "Because that's not what partnerships are about." He hesitated, then added, "Even ours." The simple statement hung between them, acknowledging for the first time that their arrangement had evolved into something neither had anticipated. Before Priya could respond, Dr. Mehra appeared in surgical scrubs. They both stood immediately. "Disiu. Surgery was successful," he announced with a tired smile. "We were able to stop the bleeding and relieve the pressure. The next 24 hours will be critical, but I'm cautiously optimistic." Relief flooded through Priya, her professional knowledge telling her just how fortunate her mother had been. Quick intervention by the top neurosurgeon had likely made the difference between recovery and permanent disability, or worse. As her father and sister received the news, Priya turned to find Arjun already watching her, his expression soft with understanding. Without thinking, she reached for his hand, his fingers intertwined with hers naturally, as if they had held hands 1,000 times before. "Thank you," she whispered, the words entirely inadequate for what she felt. "Your family is my family now," he replied simply. They were allowed to see her mother briefly in recovery. Seeing the strong woman who had raised her looking so fragile, connected to monitors and IV lines, Priya felt her composure finally break. Outside the ICU, she fought to regain control, embarrassed by her tears. Arjun guided her to a quiet corner, his hand steady on her back. "It's okay to not be the doctor right now," he said gently. "You're allowed to just be a daughter." Something about his permission, his understanding that she struggled with these dual roles, released the last of her restraint. Priya turned and buried her face against his chest, her tears soaking his shirt as his arms wrapped around her, solid and secure. She couldn't say how long they stood there, but when she finally pulled away, something fundamental had shifted between them. The careful distance she had maintained for months had disappeared in the space of a single night. As dawn broke, with her mother stabilized and sleeping, Arjun insisted Priya's father and sister go home to rest while he and Priya remained at the hospital. He somehow arranged for a private waiting area where Priya could nap on a small sofa. "You should sleep too," she told him, fighting to keep her eyes open. I will, he promised, though he made no move to leave the chair beside her. As exhaustion overtook her, Priya felt him gently tuck his suit jacket around her shoulders. Half asleep, she murmured, "Why are you so different from what everyone says about you? From what I thought you would be?" Through the haze of near sleep, she heard his soft response, "Because with you I can be the man I always wanted to be, not the one everyone expected." Priya fell asleep with those words echoing in her mind, no longer certain of anything except that the story she had told herself about their marriage, about Arjun, was unraveling thread by thread. And for the first time, she didn't try to hold the threads together. Building our forever in. The weeks following her mother's surgery, Priya witnessed a transformation, not just in her mother, who made remarkable progress in rehabilitation, but in her own marriage. The night at the hospital had cracked something open between her and Arjun, allowing glimpses of what they could be together, rather than apart. The most visible change was in their living arrangements. The invisible boundary between their separate rooms began to blur as Priya found herself lingering in the doorway of Arjun's study late at night, sharing tea and conversation until they were both yawning. Their evening discussions ranged from hospital politics to business ethics, from childhood memories to future dreams. Conversations that had once seemed impossible between two people who had married as strangers. One evening after visiting her parents' home where her mother was now recovering, Priya returned to find Arjun in the kitchen attempting to make her favorite masala chai. "You're burning the cardamom," she observed, sliding next to him at the stove. "I noticed you always make this when you've had a long day," he explained, looking slightly embarrassed as she took over the preparation. "I thought I'd have it ready when you got home." The simple gesture, his observation of her habits, his desire to comfort her, touched Priya deeply. As they sat together on the balcony, watching Mumbai's lights flicker to life across the skyline, a comfortable silence settled between them. "My mother asked me something interesting today," Priya finally said. "She asked if I was happy." Arjun studied her over the rim of his cup. "And what did you tell her?" I realized I didn't know how to answer. She met his gaze directly. "Our arrangement has become complicated." "Indeed it has," he agreed, setting down his cup. "When I proposed this marriage, I thought I knew exactly what I wanted, a partnership of convenience with clear boundaries and expectations. And now," his eyes softened, "now I find myself hoping for more than what was in our original agreement." Priya's heart quickened. "What exactly are you hoping for, Arjun?" Instead of answering immediately, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I've been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment." Inside wasn't a typical piece of jewelry but a delicate silver key. "I don't understand," Priya said, confused. "It's symbolic," Arjun explained. "When we married, you gave up your freedom for your family. This represents giving that choice back to you." His voice grew more serious. "Your mother is recovering well. Your father's debts are cleared. Your education is secured. If you want to leave this marriage, I won't stand in your way." Priya stared at the key, stunned by the offer. "You would let me go, just like that?" "Not just like that," he admitted, his usual composure slipping. "It would—" He paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. "It would break my heart, but I want you to stay because you choose to, not because of a bargain made in desperation." For months, Priya had told herself their marriage was merely practical, a business arrangement with mutual benefits. She had guarded her heart, convinced that real love couldn't grow from such beginnings. Yet here was Arjun, offering her freedom at the cost of his own happiness. "What if I don't want to leave?" she asked softly. Hope flickered in his eyes, but he remained cautious. "Then we start again. Not as a CEO and a doctor's daughter bound by circumstance, but as Arjun and Priya, building something real together." Priya closed the box and placed it back in his hand. "I don't need this key. I'm not staying out of obligation anymore." She took a deep breath, finally giving voice to feelings she had been denying for months. I'm staying because somewhere between your quiet support and your awful attempts at making chai, I fell in love with you. The vulnerability in Arjun's expression as he absorbed her words was unlike anything she had seen before. This wasn't the calculated businessman, or even the supportive husband. This was simply a man hearing that he was loved. I've loved you. Since the day you argued with me about healthcare policy over dinner, he confessed with a small laugh. You challenged every assumption I made, never intimidated by my position or name. You saw me, not the Malhotra heir, just me. That night, for the first time, they shared a bedroom not out of obligation, but choice. As Arjun held her close, Priya marveled at how their story had unfolded, how a marriage that began as a business transaction had transformed into something neither had imagined possible. The following spring, as Priya prepared to begin her residency, in orthopedic surgery they decided to renew their vows, this time not in a lavish ceremony designed to impress society, but in a small gathering by the lake where Arjun's grandmother had once taken him fishing. The first time we made promises because we had to, Arjun said, holding her hands under a canopy of marigolds. Today we make them because we want to. Priya's father, now recovered from his financial troubles and running a small but sustainable business, watched with tears in his eyes. Her mother, fully recovered thanks to Dr. Mehra's skilled surgery, beamed with pride. I know this isn't the path you would have chosen, her father whispered to Priya before the ceremony. I will always feel responsible for... Don't, Priya interrupted gently. Sometimes the wrong path leads exactly where you're meant to be. Later that evening, as their closest friends and family celebrated around them, Arjun pulled Priya away for a moment of privacy. I have something for you, he said, presenting her with a small package. Inside was a framed photograph of the two of them at the hospital on the night of her mother's surgery, Priya asleep on the sofa, Arjun watching over her with unmistakable tenderness. She hadn't known such a photo existed. One of the nurses took it, he explained. She gave it to me weeks later and said she'd never seen a CEO sit all night in a hospital waiting room before. Priya traced the image, remembering the night that had changed everything. I never expected this, she admitted. When I agreed to marry you, I thought I was giving up on love. Arjun tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. And I thought I was too busy building an empire to need it. As the celebration continued around them, Priya reflected on their journey. Their story hadn't followed any traditional path. It had begun with a contract, evolved through respect, and blossomed into love only when both had stopped fighting against the possibility. Dr. Malhotra Sharma, Arjun murmured, using the professional name she had chosen to honor both their families. Ready to build our forever? Priya smiled up at the man who had become not her captor, but her partner. Not an obligation, but a choice. I already am. In the end, what had started as a reluctant promise had become the most beautiful gift. A reminder that love finds its own path, often in the moments we least expect it. What Priya had once seen as sacrifice had become her greatest blessing, teaching her that sometimes the strongest foundations are built from the most unlikely beginnings. The empire Arjun had inherited might have brought them together, but it was the home they built within each other that truly defined their forever.